as well. So we are live, so let me just kick this off. So good morning, everybody. Hope you all had a good weekend, and good morning to all of our YouTube viewers. We are waking up to some fear in the market, right? So one of the first things that I love to do is to pull up the VIX. So if I am streaming my charts, so you guys can hop onto my stream here for everyone on our live trading room. The VIX closed on Friday at 2157, popped to as high as 3146. Guys, the VIX is one of the first indications for us to kind of have a little glimpse, right, of what's happening in the internals of the market and where the fear is, right? And it is very clear that the fear is coming from a new strain of COVID-19 that has been discovered in the UK. And there are early indications that this new strain of COVID-19 is 70% more infectious than the one that we've already have been dealing with for the past year. So it is kind of worrisome, right? Even just on a personal level. But from a day trader perspective, you got to be kind of salivating at this moment, because look at the volatility that has been created in the markets. I've been watching the pre-market since 4 a.m. and I saw at one point the Dow Jones come down to as low as 758 points, right? The markets have rebounded and they've stabilized. So on days like today, right, the first thing that probably everyone has is, let's come in with a bias and let's short the hell out of the markets. We've learned already that sometimes that's not the best way to go about it, right? The markets are not continuing to sell off. They're actually stabilizing, and they're actually creating a little bit of a nice rebound. Look at the IWM, which is the Russell 2000 ETF. It came down to as low as 187, reclaimed 188.31, which is the 20-day daily moving average, and now it's trading at it's coming straight to 192. So this market could potentially get bought straight back up. And a couple of weeks ago, that's exactly what occurred. Taj, I'm sure you remember, we came in, we were excited, we were going to short the hell out of the markets, and what happened? Within the first 5 minutes, the markets shot straight back up. They got bought up, right? Because this sell-off in pre-market could very well be a knee-jerk reaction, right? Lockdowns in Europe are real. Right, and of course those fears have crossed the pond, but the reality is that strain of COVID-19 has not yet been discovered in the U.S. There are no lockdowns here in the U.S. as intensely as there are in the U.K. and some other parts, even though it looks like it is progressing. So you guys are probably follow the news as much as I do. So clearly COVID-19 is at the forefront. Over the weekend, we had Congress agree to a $900 billion deal. They should be voting on that today. And so, these are the things that are happening right now, right? And this is influencing the market. So we just have to be aware of the headlines and the news and what's going on, especially in Europe and Asia, and because it could give us a nice perspective on how to approach today. So how do we approach today? I've marked up specific levels. I'm going to be watching. Sometimes on days like today, you don't even have to look that far to find some opportunities to trade. The S&P 500 ETF, the SPY, I've marked it up. If this breaks higher than 364.50, we can go long, put our stops right at maybe the moving averages like 363. If we see it sell off and start to break 363, 362.50 and come down to 361, then clearly there could be a nice opportunity to short the market. So I'm not biased of any way. I'm just marking my charts so that if we see a clear direction on where the market wants to go, we call out the right trade. IWM, Russell 2000. It closed Friday at 195.34. It's trading at 191.37. Went to as low as 187. So clearly there's a lot of range just with the Russell 2000 ETF. So same thing, guys. If we start seeing it break down 180, 190, 189.50, we can probably go in for a short, and this might test pre-market lows. But if this just gets straight bought up, hey, let's ride the wave. Okay. Another name I am watching is Boeing. Boeing is moving pretty heavily. I did share some news that came out on Boeing in the Stock Alerts channel. A congressional panel issued a report documenting what it determined were safety oversight lapses by the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. So with that, Boeing was gapping down as much as 15 points. It is popping back up. So right now, the way it looks, if it breaks past 213, we can go long Boeing. If this sells off, I'm looking at the 208.50 area before I determine whether I want to short it or not. The range is pretty wide, right? So there's a 4-point wiggle room. We've got to kind of let it do its thing, figure out what direction it wants to take, and then we can make a decision. But Boeing is going to be a stock that's going to move pretty aggressively today. Apple. I love Apple today. Closed at 126.65 on Friday. Is gapping down 125. Right now, the way it's setting up, if Apple breaks above 125.40, I'd like to go long, maybe with 126 calls. We'd have to put our stops at about 125 where it's sitting at right now. If Apple breaks below 124.57, we can potentially test pre-market lows and go from there. One thing that Apple occurred with Apple is that they're closing a lot of their Apple stores. So I think they've closed about 80 Apple stores in the US. So sorry about my baby in the background. He's trying to open my door. So Apple is a stock that we're definitely going to be playing today. Tesla. Tesla is a name that we're definitely trading today. Last week, I nailed Tesla so many times. I really feel in sync with the stock. Like I can feel it really well. So right now, Tesla, the way it's setting up, if it breaks above 673, I'm going to go long the stock. If Tesla breaks probably right here, 665 area, I'm going to look at potentially shorting the stock. So those are the key levels that I'm looking at right now. Other names that I'm going to look at, and I'm not going to go over them in detail because I want to give Taj a good amount of time to go over his stocks. But the cruise lines and the airlines, let's keep an eye on them. They're probably going to be on my B list today. So Carnival Cruise Lines, Norwegian Cruise Lines, American, Delta. These are names that I'm going to be watching because they're going to move pretty significantly today, especially with fears of COVID-19 and affecting the cruise lines, airlines, and the hotel industries. Some names that are gapping up, Nike. Look at Nike. Nike, there's some reports that digital sales in China are really the strongest pillars for the company. And so it closed on Friday, 137.28. It's gapping up to 145, right? So if Nike breaks above 146 and wants to rip higher, hey man, let's go long. We can buy 147, 148 calls and ride that momentum. But if Nike starts to sell off from profit taking because maybe there's pressure from the market selling off, then we can look to short Nike if it breaks 144. JP Morgan. JP Morgan is gapping up, JPM, because they are issuing buybacks, right? They've authorized $30 billion of share repurchasing program once the Federal Reserve allows them to do it. Most likely next year, the Federal Reserve will remove that restriction from the banks so that they can issue buybacks. Remember, share buyback programs are very good because you incentivize current investors by removing some float from the market, shares that are out there outstanding, right? So when you reduce supply, but there's a high demand, what happens? Price increases. It's just 101 economics, and that's exactly why share repurchasing programs work really, really well. And JP Morgan, you can see it gapping up 4 points in pre-market. So these are the biggest names that I'm going to be watching. My A list is going to be Tesla, Apple, Boeing. I'm going to keep an eye on one of the airlines, so maybe like American Airlines. And then I'm going to keep an eye on one of the cruise lines, so maybe like Norwegian Cruise Lines. So that's my A list. My B list is going to be JP Morgan, Nike, and some of the other names that I mentioned. So Taj, let me pass it over to you, man.
Yeah, man. I'm going to share actually a lot of the names that you're looking at. I agree. There aren't too many. You don't have to go outside the norm here. The entire market is kind of in this fear state right? You have the VIX. I mean, if you just look at some of the pre-market action that's happened with the VIX, yesterday the VIX, or Friday, the VIX closed right around, what was it? Closed around 2150, and now you have a move all the way up. It was at 31 and a half. It's currently around 28. So usually when that happens, you don't have to really go out there and search for names. You can play some of those big names. You can play the overall, you can play the indices, right? The SPYs, the Qs, the Russell, all of those names. And it's true. Look at some of the pre-market action that's happening just with the SPYs. You had a sell-off all the way down to 358. It's currently trading at 364, close to 365. So you already have a pretty wide range just in the pre-market action alone with the S&P. So what we're going to have this morning is when the market opens, I think you're going to have a lot of price movement. So with that being said, I would, let's not rush into anything because it's going to be very volatile. Let's, maybe wait a few minutes, see which direction the market wants to go initially, have our risk reward, and see if we can have that continuation, whether it's to the upside or to the downside. So with that, I'm going to be watching the SPYs, the Qs, and the Russell, just because I think those names are going to be moving, and you don't have to really drift out too much. Usually those moves are very clean. There's really no fake outs that happen. There's no liquidity issues, so you can get in and out of those positions with no problem. So that's going to be on my watch list. Another name that's going to be on my list as well is Microsoft. So Microsoft, if you remember last week, was setting up nicely for a potential breakout above that key level of 219. Now, it tried on Thursday to break out, and then Friday it had a pretty nasty move to the downside. However, there was a nice recovery that happened throughout the trading day. And now you can see Microsoft is making its way back up to that 219 level. During the post-market hours, it actually was able to clip 219, and due to the fear of the market, it actually sold off. However, I think Microsoft has a good chance of maybe reclaiming those levels of that 219. Citi upgraded their price target from to 272 from 229. So there you go. You have a tier one analyst coming out and doing that a pretty big price target upgrade for a name like Microsoft. So if the market is able to rally, Microsoft is definitely one name that I'll be keeping an eye on. Another name I'll be watching is Nike. So Nike is another name as well. They reported their earnings, crushed their earnings. I think their earnings per share estimated was, let's see what we have here. It was, it's not loading. 63 cents per share. They actually reported 78 cents per share. So that's pretty good for a stock like Nike, one of the leading shoe brand companies of the world, really beating out expectations, especially during these times of coronavirus and everything. So Nike is gapping up right into its all-time highs. And, as you know, some of the names that we've traded, when the stock gaps up into the all-time highs, and if it can gain some momentum to the upside, there's a real opportunity to make some very fast money and potentially big money if it's able to really go on a run.
Right.
So what I do like about Nike is that you have this range going on right now. Now, it's not being heavily traded, but nonetheless, there's still a defined range that's going on, primarily between 144 and 146 and a half. So if Nike is able to reclaim, I'd say around 146, we can look at longs. We can look at longs here. If the market's able to rally, that'll give us confidence as well, taking our long positions. And let's see what Nike can do. If it's able to break down below 144, there's a potential setup of, a failed gap on Nike, and maybe you get the gap fill back down to 141. But again, let's let the market play out for the first few minutes and see what it wants to do. Another name I like Alex mentioned, was Boeing. Boeing has been pretty wild today. Huge sell-off. I mean, this stock was trading near 220 at the close on Friday. It gapped all the way down to 203. That is a very, very large move for a stock like Boeing. And, these are the names that are going to get crushed the most if the coronavirus starts to pick up some bad headlines as it did, with the UK. These names are going to get crushed. You saw it before, just earlier this year. Your American Airlines, your Boeing, your cruise ship, Royal Caribbeans, all these names were getting crushed. So keep that in mind. If, God forbid, if things start getting worse, look for these names.
Mm-hmm.
You see an article come out in the middle of the day, like, U.S. is shutting down more cities or whatever it is, or things are getting worse out there. Look for these names for potential shorts. Now look for your setup at the same time. Just don't go out there and short the market just because an article came out, right?
Right.
Make sure you have your predefined risk reward when you're taking a lot of these trades. So I really like Boeing, especially if the market sells off. I am going to be looking for a potential play on Boeing, left and right, because again, these are going to be the weaker names compared to most. So I'm going to have Boeing right there at the top of my list. Another name that I like, I really do like Tesla as well. Today is going to be the first day Tesla is actually trading on the S&P 500.
Yep.
So congrats to Tesla. And one thing that we talked about on last week before Tesla was introduced into the S&P is buy the hype, sell the news, right? And look what you have going on with Tesla right now. Tesla closed at 695. 695 on Friday. It gapped down. It's now trading at 670. So that is exactly why. Tesla literally closed right at its high on Friday. Right at the very high. So you would expect some continuation. However, what happened? The event is actually occurring right now. Sell off. Right now, I think it's also being paired with the news of the coronavirus and everything.
Yeah.
However, that's trading 101. Buy the hype, sell the actual event, sell the news. So Tesla, what I do like about Tesla is it's recovering nicely. It's having a nice little bull flag kind of form here, especially right before the morning open. So if Tesla's able to trade above, what level is this? Around 673, 674.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of room to the upside. I really don't see any trouble until around 678, 680 range. So, the thing about Tesla, and kind of a running joke, is a lot of times it gaps down. It's bought right back up, right? It almost seems like that's going to happen every time. But let's wait for that setup, right? Again, let's not have any type of bias going into the names,
Right.
Keep those things in mind, but look for the actual opportunity for a setup like that. There was also one other name that I wanted to keep an eye on. Which was it? Actually, I think that's it. Oh, and Apple. Yeah, I think you mentioned it already, but Apple. I really like what Apple's doing today, especially if the market's able to recover. Apple has formed a very strong base down here around the 124 range, 125.
Yep.
If it's able to trade right back above 125.50, I'll look for a long, especially if the market starts rallying. I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on the SPYs and the Qs, just so that will give me confirmation with a lot of these trades, whether it's with Apple, Boeing, Microsoft. That will help pair with the trade. Hey, I see the Qs rallying, I see the SPYs rallying. Apple hit, my 125.50 level. Let's take our longs, right? Let's place our stops at low of day and see if we can gain some momentum to the upside. So that's pretty much going to be my watch list. My A list is going to be Apple and Boeing and Nike. Those are going to be my big three. Microsoft is going to be on my B list, along with what's the other one? The S&P and the other indices. I'd want to trade Apple before the S&P 500. That has a little bit more priority, for me personally. But that's just because I love to trade Apple. So
Yeah.
a little bit of stock bias there.
No, Apple's always a good stock to trade, man. One name that I forgot to mention that I had on one of my charts here on the other monitor was Zoom. So and I see Carlos mentioned it here. So Zoom is a name, guys. Whenever COVID fears picks up, Zoom tends to get bought up. It is gapping up 14 points in pre-market. It went to as high as 429. Let's keep an eye on Zoom. Zoom can be like one of our B list stocks. But if we see Zoom break above 426 and test that pre-market high of 429, go long. Let me pull up a daily chart on Zoom here, and Zoom has actually created a nice basing action here. So you could see over the course of several weeks actually, and since November, it's created a nice basing action here, like the 390, 380 area. And what's happening today? It's gapping above the 8 MA, the 13, and the 20. So you can potentially have a short-term new trend that's creating. So let's keep an eye on it. Let's keep an eye on it because, of course, if there's more lockdowns, that could potentially be a benefit for Zoom, because then you've got more customers using Zoom, more businesses using Zoom, and that's why you see the stock gapping up today. So that's going to be on my B list for today. So, well, with that being said, guys, Taj and I, we love reminding everybody the following. Don't try to make a home run on that first trade. Don't try to be a millionaire today. And we say that jokingly, but we also mean it seriously. You know, my approach on Mondays is the following. We just came back from a nice weekend. You know, maybe some of us partied, maybe some of us are just still recovering, you know, whatever the case may be. Ease in right into your trades. Let's start making base hits. Score one here, another one here, another one here. And then once you've got some cushion on the day, then you can take some bigger bets. So that's just my personal advice. That's what I do personally. And I'm looking at the time. So let's go ahead and end this recording. For everyone on YouTube, leave some comments. Any questions, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.